Good morning. Today we will be discussing about the important cells of immune system. Last day we had discussed about how the immune system is classified based on how the defense mechanism, like there is an innate defense mechanism and there is a acquired or adaptive or specific defense mechanism. So we know that innate defense mechanism is inborn. It is non-specific, right? So, and acquired defense mechanism is adaptive and specific. It's supposed to be the third line of defense. The first and second line of defense comes under innate defense mechanism. So let us go through what is the first line of defense just to sum up. There is the physical barriers. That is the first line of defense which is externally found. The skin, the mucosal layer, nasal hairs, the cilia in the respiratory tracts, the chemical barriers which include the sebaceous gland secretions of oil, sweat, then the stomach acids which are with the low pH, then the earwax, then the lysozyme and the tears, the lactic acid, etc. are the first line of defense. Then the internal defense or the second line of defense includes the phagocytes and macrophages. So here we were talking about the cells of immune system. So if you know that these are the cells which come under innate defense mechanism. ഇമ്മ്യൂൺ സിസ്റ്റത്തിൽ ഇൻവോൾവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സെല്ലുകളെ കുറിച്ചാണ് ഈ ടോപ്പിക്കിൽ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ അതിൽ ഫസ്റ്റ് ലൈൻ ഓഫ് ഡിഫെൻസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സെക്കൻഡ് ലൈൻ ഓഫ് ഡിഫെൻസിലൊക്കെ വരുന്ന അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇനേറ്റ് ഡിഫെൻസ് മെക്കാനിസം ഓർ നോൺ സ്പെസിഫിക് മെക്കാനിസത്തിൽ വരുന്ന കുറച്ച് സെല്ലുകളുടെ പേരാണ് ഫാഗോസൈറ്റ്സ്, മാക്രോഫേജസ്, ദെൻ ന്യൂട്രോഫിൽസ്, മോണോസൈറ്റ്സ് ഒക്കെ വരുന്നതാണ് ഇനേറ്റ് mechanism വരുന്നത്. It also includes, in the second line of defense, it not only includes the cells but also the inflammatory reactions, the fever, interferons, complement system, natural killer cells. So here the cells are important. The phagocyte, the macrophages, neutrophils, then there are dendritic cells, then there are natural killer cells which we will deal in detail in the next slide. So the important cells coming under innate defense mechanism are the natural killer cells, the phagocytes or macrophages, the dendritic cells, the neutrophils. Okay, so that is coming in the innate defense mechanism. The third line of defense, which include the adaptive immunity, it comprises the T cells. That is cytotoxic T cells are there, helper T cells, suppressor T cells and memory T cells. Similarly, the B cells, which is including the plasma cells, memory B cells, antigen presenting cells, like this is a link between the innate. It's also seen in the internal second level of defense as well as in the adaptive immunity. So macrophages and dendritic cells and some B cells. Then in passive immunity, it is the antibodies which is produced and is injected into the body, which includes the passive immunity. So അപ്പോൾ ഇമ്മ്യൂൺ സിസ്റ്റത്തിൻ്റെ സെല്ലുകളെ കുറിച്ചാണ് പഠിക്കുന്നത്. ഇനേറ്റ് ഡിഫെൻസിൽ വരുന്ന സെല്ലാണ് നാച്ചുറൽ കില്ലർ സെൽസ്, മാക്രോഫേജസ്, ഫാഗോസൈറ്റ്സ്. ഫാഗോസിറ്റിക് സെൽസ് തന്നെയാണ് മാക്രോഫേജസ്. പിന്നെ അതേപോലെയുള്ള ന്യൂട്രോഫില്ലുകളും മോണോസൈറ്റ്സ് ആർ എക്സാമ്പിൾസ്. എന്നാൽ അഡാപ്റ്റീവ് ഇമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിയിൽ കൂടുതലായിട്ട് റോൾ പ്ലേ ചെയ്യുന്നത് T cells and B cells. We will deal them in detail. So before that, how does the cell develop? It develops from the bone marrow. All the cells of immune system develop from the bone marrow. അപ്പോൾ ബോൺ മാരോ എന്നാണ് ഇതിൻ്റെ ഒറിജിൻ വരുന്നത്. ആ ഒറിജിൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പാരന്റ് സെൽ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് കോൾഡ് ഹിമാറ്റോപോയറ്റിക് സെൽ ആൻഡ് ദ പ്രോസസ് ഇസ് കോൾഡ് ഹിമാറ്റോപോയസിസ്. So, hematopoiesis vary, hematopoietic stem cell, which is a multipotent എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ it can differentiate into different kinds of cells. So, it divides into a myeloid progenitor cells and a lymphoid progenitor cell. So, there are two classifications of the hematopoietic stem cell. One, it is as myeloid progenitor cell, which is also pluripotent. They can also differentiate into different kinds of cells. Lymphoid progenitor cells can differentiate into different kinds of cells. So, that is pluripotent cells. And hematopoietic cell can differentiate into either myeloid cells and lymphoid cells. So, it is hence a multipotent cell. So, myeloid progenitor cell, it can differentiate into erythrocytes and platelets, and then it can also produce the cells of immune system. Okay, the cells of immune system includes innate mechanism. We had already talked about the immune system comprises of cells called as neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. These three cells are always they are classified together as granulocytes. If you observe the cytoplasm, they contain granules and they have polymorphonuclear nucleus, that is polymorphonuclear cells. They are called polymorphonuclear cells because they have multi-lobed nucleus. So, this is a tri-lobed nucleus, this is a bilobed nucleus, this is somewhat a bilobed nucleus, and then the myeloid progenitor cells also produce monocytes, which is again differentiates into macrophages and dendritic cells. So, these comprises of the innate immune system. Neutrophil, eosinophil, basophil, which is classified as granulocytes, and agranulocytes, which does not have the granules, they come under monocyte, macrophages, dendritic cells. Then there are from the lymphoid progenitor cells, it develops the natural killer cells, but this natural killer cell come under innate mechanism. Apart from natural killer cells that are produced, there is lymphocytes, that is classified as T lymphocyte because they develop in the thymus gland, and it was first discovered from there itself, and it matures in the thymus glands. And B lymphocyte, they develop in the bone marrow and mature in the bone marrow. But the B lymphocyte was derived because it was first discovered from bursa of Fabricius, a gland seen in birds. So, T lymphocyte and B lymphocyte are coming under adaptive immunity. They come, the T lymphocytes are classified as helper T cells, cytotoxic T cells, and there are memory T cells or regulatory or effector suppressor T cells. There are many classifications of it. So, B lymphocyte, they differentiate again into effector B cells, then memory B cells, and also as plasma cells. These plasma cells are the cells which produce antibody, which is it is responsible for antibody mediated cell responses, immune responses, while T cells, they are involved in cell mediated cell responses. So, ഇതിൽ നമ്മൾ ജന്മന നമ്മളുടെ ബോഡിയിൽ കാണുന്ന ചില സെല്ലുകളുടെ ക്ലാസിഫിക്കേഷൻ ആണ് പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ബോൺ മാരോയിലാണ് സെല്ലുകളുടെ ആദ്യം ഒറിജിൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അത് ഉണ്ടാവുന്നത് ഹിമറ്റോപോയറ്റിക് സ്റ്റെം സെല്ലിൽ നിന്നാണ്. ബോൺ മാരോ എന്നാണ് എല്ലാ WBCസും എറിത്രോസൈറ്റ്സ്, പ്ലേറ്റ്ലെറ്റ്സ് ഒക്കെ ഒറിജിനേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ആ പ്രോസസ്സിനെ, the whole process is called hematopoiesis, and it develops from hematopoietic stem cell. From the hematopoietic stem cell, again differentiation takes place into a myeloid progenitor and a lymphoid. The myeloid progenitor is the one which generates the erythrocytes and platelets, which are not involved in the immune response. The immune response or cells involved in immune response includes neutrophils or granulocytes and agranulocytes. Agranulocytes, there are monocytes which are the most important ones, they include the phagocytic cells or macrophages and the dendritic cells. The granulocytes, that is those cells which contain granules in their cytoplasm, and also they have polymorphonucleus, that is the multi-lobed nucleus. They are classified as neutrophils. Neutrophils are abundant in number and more in number, like 50 to 60 percentage of them are neutrophils. Then there are basophils, which is very few in number or practically absent in normal individuals. Eosinophils may be found to 4 to 6 in number. So then there are lymphocytes, which are involved, that develops from the lymphoid progenitor cells. So lymphoid progenitor cells basically divide into T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes and natural killer cells. But the natural killer cells formed by the lymphoid progenitor is involved in innate defense mechanism. So innate defense mechanism illulladu granulocytes, agranulocytes and natural killer cells. ഈ granulocytes il varunnaanu neutrophil, eosinophil, basophil. And agranulocytes il varunna monocytekalana. Monocytes are differentiated into macrocytes and dendrite cells. Then natural killer cells come from the lymphoid progenitor, but they are involved in innate defense mechanism. Then coming to the adaptive mechanism of immune defense mechanism, there they develop from the lymphoid progenitor cells, that is T cells and B cells. So T cells, they mature in the thymus, while B cells, they are formed from bone marrow, mature in bone marrow. They are both of them, the T cells are of different types: helper, effector, cytotoxic, memory cells. Then there are suppressor T cells, while B lymphocytes are differentiated into B effector, plasma cells, then memory cells. And B cells is the only one which is involved in the production of antibodies, so they are related to humoral immune defense mechanism or antibody mediated cell response. എന്നാൽ T സെല്ലുകൾ എന്ത് ചെയ്യുന്നു വെച്ചാൽ ആന്റിബോഡി പ്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്യില്ല, they directly go and kill the infected cells. So it is cell mediated immune response എന്നാണ് അതിനെ പറയാം. So this is the quick classification of how the cells are involved in innate and immune system. So you know that innate എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ inborn ആണ്, ഇത് ജന്മനാ ഉള്ള immune cells ആണ് ഇതുള്ളത്. They are non-specific. ഏതൊരു ആൻറ്റിജൻ വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാലും അത് non-specific ആയിട്ട് attack ചെയ്യും. It can react to any antigen and respond very quickly. While adaptive എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് is very specific to specific antigen, they are their response is very slow. Now those cells which are involved in innate mechanism we had already discussed, that is the neutrophil, eosinophils, basophils, which is classified as granulocytes, and there are natural killer cells which come from the lymphoid progenitor cells, and there are monocyte differentiates into macrophages and dendritic cells. The mast cells are actually modified basophils, or basophils when they leave the capillary and enter into connective tissue, then it is called as mast cells. They are involved in allergic reactions. ഇതല്ലാതെ അഡാപ്റ്റീവ് ഇമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി അതിൽ ഇൻവോൾവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സെൽസ് ആണ് T cells and B cells. And also in some cases the natural killer cells also play a role in adaptive immunity. Let us look at the immune cells. That is, there are leukocytes. Okay, there are leukocytes or white blood cells. Then there are plasma cells which secrete the antibodies. Then there are macrophages which invade the invading particles. Then there are mast cells which trigger inflammatory responses. These white blood cells, they are of different kinds, that is neutrophil, basophil, eosinophils, the agranulocytes and agranulocytes, and agranulocytes are neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil, and granulocytes